Hello once again. I am the man, the middle-aged nerd. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So we were taught in elementary school once upon a time. What was his aim? To come and pillage, plunder, and rape the native populations of the American continents? Highly unlikely, considering he didn't even know the American continents existed. In about the mid-15th century, the Portuguese had developed a class of sailing vessel called the caravel. It was a three-masted ship, which was a dramatic evolution over the single-masted galleys that had been used for over 1,000, since the days of ancient Rome. The cool thing about the caravel was it didn't require oar power to make it go, to propel it. And because of the technology of the three sails, it was actually able to sail forward in beating wind, as in an opposing wind. I might do a video someday about how it works, but you can Google and look it up yourself. It was also a bigger and heavier ship than the galley-class vessel, and as a result, around the time of the Renaissance, the 1450s, 1460s, you see an explosion in sea travel. Now, mainly what you're seeing is coastal nations in Europe like England, the Netherlands, Spain, Portugal, France, Italy. They're using ships to trade with with African nations, but also to sail around the Horn of Africa to get to India, China, Japan, and trade spices, jewelry, incenses, goods, the type of stuff they traded in those days. And they realized that it was a heck of a lot easier to, let the water do the work. Before, in the days of Marco Polo and before, you got some guy in frickin', Shanghai, and he's got a wagon train of gold or spices or, saltpeter, whatever the heck he's got. He's got to cart that shit all the way through China and Russia and whatever the Mongolians were in control of, through the Ural Mountains and East Europe, West Europe, to get it to, Paris, London, Lisbon, wherever the heck it's in and up. Along the way, you encounter bandits and the elements, animals, natural disasters. It's a very expensive and perilous way to transport goods, which is why before the age of the caravel, only the very rich, the nobles and the kings and queens, were able to have things like black pepper to make your potatoes taste a little bit better. That was a tremendous luxury in those days. So in the late 15th century, there's this explosion in sea travel, because now you don't have to worry about bandits. You don't have to worry about natural disaster. You hop on your boat. You got your guys, your sailors, and you follow the coast of Africa all the way around till the Middle East, and you got India, and there's ports along the coast of India. Then you get to China and the other Southeast Asian nations, and it's fantastic. It's a much more profitable way to trade. So you come along to the 1480s. I don't research any of this stuff before I come on. I just try to speak from memory if I have a topic that kind of fires me up. So you got this guy Christopher Columbus. He's a sailing captain, businessman. He's, off the top of my head, I think he was in his 30s somewhere, and he had been successful. I mean, hell, he was 30 and he wasn't dead. For a sailor in those days, that's a life well lived. If you made it to your 30th birthday and you weren't dead of scurvy or some storm washing you overseas. but he was also a amateur astronomer. It was kind of a new technology, no money in it really, but it was cartography was being used to map the stars to navigate by them. Because when you're out open sea, you've got to have a way to navigate. Compasses were I don't think were necessarily a thing, but still, even if you did have a compass, yeah, I think yeah they had compasses, they had ways. Yeah, and since the Viking days, they had compasses, but they still had to be able to chart where the heck they were. So a good navigator, a good sailing captain, had to know the position of the stars and know how to navigate. And I don't know if it was a fluke or if he was looking for it or if it was just a wild theory, but in the course of studying astronomy and the position of the Earth and the sunlight, what have you, he has this nutty idea that the Earth is round. You see, before that time, the geocentric theory, going back to the days of ancient Greece, had prevailed that said the world was flat. And if you went out too far into the ocean, you'd fall off. And the Leviathan would get you, or the Kraken, or what the heck ever. So sailors were very wary of sailing out too far because everyone thought, well, at some point you're going to fall off the side of the earth. Because, like I said, they thought the earth was like a big cube, or maybe like a disc or something. But Columbus, he's the first guy to realize, though he wasn't 100% sure, he has this theory that the world is round and that it's actually would be much quicker and even more profitable to sail to China by going west. You head out of Portugal or Scotland, Ireland, England, somewhere on a westernmost European port, and you sail due west, and if you figure as you go, trying to think, you figure it'd be about a 3-month journey, depending on winds, a 2 to 3 month journey, and you should bump into China, the east coast of China, which it was much quicker. I think it was maybe like it was like a year-round trip to go from London to Shanghai and back again. Not to mention rounding the Horn of Africa is very dangerous. Or it was in those days. The weather is very, very bad, very, very difficult to navigate. A lot of ships end up on the shoals, and a lot of souls end up at the bottom of the ocean. So he goes to there was no venture capital firms. It's the Middle Ages, for Christ's sakes. So he goes to who has the money. He goes to the King of Italy, and he says, "Hey man, I got this idea. I think the world is round. I want you to loan me some cash to outfit an expedition, sail west around the world." The Italians, because Christopher Columbus, he was Italian, they laugh him out of court. They laugh him out of Rome, and they think he's nuts. And I don't remember if he tried England or Portugal, but he was at the time carrying on a bit of an affair with the Queen of Spain, Queen Isabella. So he goes to his girlfriend. Now this is on the down low. They're not supposed to know about this because Queen Isabella was playing her own political game at the time, because she had a kind of a tenuous position as the monarch of Spain. So he goes to his lover Isabella and he says, "Hey baby, I got an idea that, if I'm right, can make you and the country of Spain and me extremely wealthy." And she says, "Well, what is it?" "Well, the world is round." She says, "What?" He explains it to her, and she trusts him. She loves him. But monarchy at the time was not despotism. A king or a queen was not the same thing as a god king, like a pharaoh in Egypt, or some god king chief in some island nation where there's 100 people and one guy is revered as the be-all end-all. The kings and queens of those days, they couldn't just do whatever they wanted to. Queen Isabella had to go before her lords. All the dukes and the earls and the counts and the barons and the people who owned land, who collected taxes from the citizens who lived on their land, and then like the mafia, they juiced the king or the queen. So the queen goes, "Hey, I know this man. He's a brilliant man. He's an apt sailor, an able seaman. Great. He thinks that the world is round, and he thinks that it would be twice as quick to sail to China by sailing west around the round world, and you'll arrive in the West Indies, Indochina, China, India, whatever that whole region of the world, whatever you want to call it." The lords, they think she's nuts. They think he's nuts, but they make a deal, and this was risky not only for Columbus but for Queen Isabella, which was basically, we'll fund this expedition. And that is, this wasn't a gift. This wasn't a grant. This was a loan. This was an investment, and they gave just a bare minimum amount of money to just barely make this whole thing work. If everything with the voyage went right, it still was maybe a 50-50 shot. But Queen Isabella was staking her political reputation, because if Columbus just ran off with the money and didn't come back, most likely it would be her head, on a on an axeman's chopping block, and there'd be a new king. So there was, so from the lords that agreed to help fund the expedition, the lords were just as happy to see Columbus fail, because that means one of them could potentially take over and be the new king. So Columbus gets the bare minimum amount of money, and he gets these three vessels: the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, which by the standards in 1492, these were old ships. They were not top of the line Caravel class vessels. They had been in service. They were beat up. They were held together by, duct tape, chiclets, barbed wire, and a prayer. You dig? Columbus goes to recruiting some sailors to sail these vessels. And in those days, you had, much like today, you had officers who typically worked for a company and were kept on, and or they were in the military, they were in the actual Navy, and they got a salary or a cut or whatever, but they were typically educated from good families, and they were able seamen, but they were ultimately responsible for the success or the failure of the missions. So they'd go out to the harbors and the ports, and they'd find sailors. And in those days, just a regular old seaman, typically not going to be literate, but they'll typically have like a tattoo of an anchor on their arm, or maybe some piece of insignia on their shirt or on their clothing, just to signify that they are indeed sailors. So Christopher Columbus goes, and he's trying to recruit sailors for this expedition. Now, regular seamen and midshipmen in those days, they worked on a contract, and it was commission. A lot of times it was, all right, we're going to go X, Y, and Z, and whatever booty, whatever plunder, whatever riches, whatever profit from, if it's a trading expedition, whatever the profit is, you get a share, so to speak. Well, none of the proper seamen wanted to take it on. They're like, "What, you're sailing west around the world? Well, you're nuts." They wouldn't do it. Columbus had to go and get, shall we say, men of a more loose moral character. He had to recruit, poorer quality seamen who maybe couldn't find work on other boats. He had to get criminals, ne'er-do-wells, misanthropes, maybe some sailors who were maybe on the run from John Law, and it was a gamble. It was very, very difficult. He had to kind of used God to sell a lot of them. And a lot of them went in very hesitant, very superstitious, the sailors were in those days. So he sets out on his expedition. I think it was like June of 1492. He sets out. And he tells them, if I'm right, we're going to reach China in about 3 months, 2 to 3 months. And it's, these sailors, each ship I think was manned by about 20 to 30 seamen and officers altogether. So there were, I think, 70, 80, 90, sailors in the whole between the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. So they get out, and they're sailing for a few weeks, and there's a couple of near mutinies. Columbus has to basically take his own personal fortune and bribe his own men to just keep them from mutinying. He had to have an armed guard posted at his cabin while he slept, so they wouldn't mutiny. And on October 10th, October 12th, something to that effect, they've been at sea 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that, and Columbus is awoken by the shout of "Land ahoy!" which was very shocking to him, because that means he's not where he thinks he is, because he was very precise. He was very precise in how he did his calculations for how long the voyage should take. Every day they would have instruments they would drop in the water that would measure how fast they were going. So Columbus, he shows up in modern day Cuba, I think it was, or the Dominican Republic, one of those Caribbean islands. They show up, come ashore. It's a jungle island, and he's like, "I've been to China before. This doesn't look like China." Some natives come up to him, and immediately they think these Europeans are gods. They come over here. They're wearing clothes, boots, armor. They've got some horses, gunpowder. They know metallurgy. They just sailed out of the horizon on these ships. So immediately this tribe greets Columbus and greets him as a god. Well, Columbus, being a wise and astute businessman, realizes the incredible opportunity. He realizes that they have discovered a new world. So he spends a number of months in the New World, on the North American continent. He befriends one of, I think it was maybe, the record keeping is so sketchy, but like the son of the local chief or something to that effect. They start to learn each other's language. He teaches, I guess, Italian and maybe Spanish to this native. The native kind of teaches his language, and he becomes kind of like the liaison for his men and their men. I think at some point the natives had, suggested that, hey, there's another tribe on the other side of the island. You guys got these boomsticks. Could you help us out with our little problem, right? And Columbus is like, hey, I see you guys are like have a lot of gold. They just got jewelry. They got earrings made out of gold, necklaces. They've got teeth, and they got gold bones to their nose, all kinds of stuff. And gold is just, to these people, it's like nothing. It's everywhere. And Columbus is saying, you know what? I think we can work out a deal. So they take some men, they go and wipe out this other tribe, and so now the tribe that Columbus initially meets and his people, they're friends. They're having a good old time. The men and the women of the indigenous women are mixing. They're having a great time. So Columbus says, listen, I got to get back to my own people and tell them what I've found. He had sailed to a couple other islands. He sailed and landed in the American mainland, and he brings back to Barcelona, Spain, capital of Spain at the time. I think it was Barcelona. I would assume it was Barcelona. It might not have been, but wherever the hell Queen Isabella was, he brings back turkeys, corn, tobacco, gold, just all kinds of hammocks. Like the Native American peoples had like figured out how to make hammocks. Bananas, maybe. I think, yeah, maybe like brought back bananas. Chocolate, brought back chocolate. And just all this wonderful treasure. So he goes back to Spain and he tells he brings a chest full of gold. He says there is a ton of it over the New World. Now, this is where the history gets a little bit more aggressive. The lords and the nobles and the Queen of Spain herself, who had initially invested in the mission, they're saying, "Oh, this thing is going to pay off," and they got to get their cut. They're, like I said, they weren't just giving this guy money out of the kindness of their own heart. Spain was in a power struggle with the French and the English at the time, and the Portuguese were involved, the Dutch were involved. This was very vital to the national interests of Spain that they get over there, they establish colonies, they get governors, they get forts, they get soldiers, they start trading immediately. So Columbus is sent back and he's made the governor of some province. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but some other nobles went back and they were given governorships. They start, as best as Columbus was able to devise some sort of a map and say, well, I found this up here, I found this here. The nobles and the Queen of Spain, they start chopping up the New World. All right, I'm going to go be the governor here, and then you have what turned out to be the age of the conquistadors in this that followed the 16th century. But the Spanish were basically the first to the New World. Columbus was actually he did become a very wealthy man, but he ultimately was imprisoned because he wasn't wanting to go along with the status quo. The lords and the nobles who would win over there to establish trading forts and outposts, they basically kind of viewed these indigenous people as lesser life forms, enslaved them, and didn't have a problem. They basically turned them into slave laborers, which it was, you keep up your daily life, you do what you do, but you need to bring us X amount of grams of gold a day, or else it's off with your head. And so the Spanish, in very short order, start, being industrious, shall we say. Columbus actually fought against some of these nobles and was ultimately imprisoned. He thought that, listen, man, you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar. Let's be nice. Let's have cooperation and collaboration, as opposed to competition and capitulation. The others didn't see it that way. They sent his butt home, and he did like 7 or 8 years in prison in Spain. And ultimately, through the 16th century, and then when the Puritans started coming in 1620, the United States eventually was established, and all the countries over here. You can't deny that Christopher Columbus discovering the New World is the most significant achievement in the history of mankind. He was not the rapist, the pillager. Unfortunately, to be the man, you got to beat the man, so to speak. No one remembers. I don't remember the names of the lords and the Spanish nobles and the connected people who came over after Columbus and were maybe a little heavy-handed with the native populations. But he gets remembered for the good and the bad, even though he did not actively participate and in the bad, and he tried to reason. He tried to get the Spanish lords to understand that, dude, these people already worship us as gods. You know, if you try to break them, they're going to get mad and they're going to stop thinking we're gods, and then there's going to be problems. But I just wanted to put that out there and set the record straight that Columbus he was not some kind of evil guy. He was just a dude living in the Middle Ages trying to make a buck. And he ended up discovering a whole other half of the globe that nobody in the civilized world thought or knew existed. That's all.